housekeeping, first of all, just to get that out of the way. Toilets are out to the left on the corridor. We're not expecting a fire alarm or anything, but if the fire alarm does go off, then do follow up officers out the building. Fire exits over to the right and there. Please bear in mind too that the local air forum is being filmed by the County Council. I do have a request for a list of the representatives at the local liaison forum, and also for apologies tonight. So I'll just very quickly run through them for your information. So we have 12 councillors on the local liaison forum. There's myself, Queen O'Reilly, Charlotte Perry, and Paul Sales from Arbury. There's John Hitkin and Marie-Louise Holland, although John represents himself and Marie-Louise at the local liaison forum, and Barry Holt from Castle Ward. There's Mike Mason and David Jenkins from the County Council, and there's also 3 South County councillors, Councillor Cross, Councillor Davis and Councillor Stoneham. So they are the council representatives, and we also have representatives co-opted onto the local liaison forum from Histon Road LLF Association. That's Lillian Windflower, who's also Vice Chair of the local liaison forum. Anne Mullinger from Windsor Road, and Anna Crutchley from the Benton area, David Warren from Darwin Aikman area, Vivek Iyer, from Bermuda Flat, Vivek Iyer from Darwin Aikman area, Margaret Reynolds from Oxford Road, David Bailey from Richmond Road, Christine Lafon from Stretton Avenue, Irina Bosim from Roseford Road. So they are all the members and co-opted members of the local liaison forum. And anyone present here tonight who is on the local liaison forum are welcome to come up and join us here at the top table. But if you wish to remain in the audience, that's fine by me. But, so, in terms of apologies tonight, I was specifically asked to get apologies and to get expressions of interest in attending the local liaison forums and the workshops. So I've got apologies from Councillor O'Reilly, who's because of work commitment can't be here tonight. From Councillor Sales, who's because of illness. I've had apologies from Councillor Cross because of other meeting commitments. From David Jenkins, likewise, because of an important parish council meeting. Mike Mason, who's recovering from major ankle surgery. And I think that's all the specific apologies. As far as councillors are concerned, I've not heard from Barry Holt of Castle Ward or South Cambs councillors Davis or Stoneham. So that's all the apologies I specifically received, and those that have not received, I've not heard from. So I hope that's helpful, because I've been specifically asked to make it very clear what membership is, and also apologies for tonight's meeting. So I'll just explain, before we get to a presentation that's been requested from Margaret Reynolds, this is Colin Harris from Cambridge Connect. Just before we get to that, can I apologise that we don't have printed copies of the minutes of the last local liaison forum, the 8th of August, here tonight. I'm really sorry about that. They are on the website, but I quite appreciate that people here, I'm sure, would prefer to have printed copies available as well. We'll make sure that they're available at the next local liaison forum, which will be in 3 weeks' time after the next 2 workshops, 4 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, after the next 2 workshops that follow this local liaison forum. So apologies that the minutes aren't provided, and I don't know if anyone has got any comments on the minutes, if they're looking on the website or have looked already on the website. But we'll have to take them at read, but although we can come back to them, I'm sure, incorporate those minutes with the minutes of this meeting the next time the local liaison forum meets. I hope that will work okay. You should have had on the table various bits of paper documentation, the draft report from the consultants, the Cambridge Connect presentation, a reminder in terms of reference of the local liaison forum, and also the extract from the City Deal Board in terms of the remit of this local liaison forum regarding the resolution from the 9th of June, which basically directs how this local liaison forum sort of works according to that remit. So if anyone hasn't got anything, that's all on the table at the back there. So that's the various bits of documentation. So without further ado, we'll go into a presentation from Colin Harris of Cambridge Connect. And I think probably we on top at the moment might probably sit in the audience and have a look. Okay, Colin, thank you.
Right, yes.
need some assistance with somebody pushing the button at the appropriate place.
Could you switch it off? Hello?
Okay, how's that? Sorry about that. Okay, I've been allocated 15 minutes to try and go through with you the proposals that Cambridge Connect has initiated for an alternative vision of transport in Cambridge. It is very different to the models on the table, and it is a very long-term vision. And I'll just explain to you, first of all, why I took this initiative. About a year ago, like many people in Cambridge, I received through the mailbox information about an initiative for the city deal. And that initiative was to build a busway from Camborne into the city centre via the sort of rough A428 sort of area. And initially, I was concerned about that purely from my own personal point of view. I live in Coton, on the west side of Cambridge. But when I started to look more closely at that proposal and also other proposals for the rest of Cambridge, I was deeply concerned that there did not appear to be a fully integrated and long-term plan for the future of Cambridge transport. And for those reasons, and because I care very much about this city, I came here 25 years ago as a student, and I loved it, so I settled here and I set up my business, which is an environmental consultancy. But I was so deeply concerned about what I saw happening that I felt it wasn't enough to just complain. I felt I really should do something, and what could I do creatively to try to make a contribution to possibly alter the discussion. So I started by doing quite a lot of research about, well, if we started with a blank slate, now I know we don't have a blank slate, but if we did, what kind of transport system would we actually work towards, and what sort of solutions would be appropriate? As an environmental consultant, I very quickly realised that rail is actually one of the best forms of transport environmentally. It also has a capacity to move people very quickly and in large numbers. So very early on in my research, I identified rail as being the kind of solution that we might want to be thinking about. Now, broadly speaking, there's two main forms of rail. I'm going to really simplify this, but heavy rail, which is the trains going to King's Cross, and light rail, which is another word for that is trams. The difference between trams and light rail is that trams run on streets and share the road space with other vehicles. Light rail has a dedicated line and it is not sharing road space. So we're proposing light rail, which is on the whole on dedicated lines. And so I just want to make that clarification right up front. So straight in then, you can see the tram there, that we've already got the name Cambridge on the front. We're getting close. Sorry about the quality of the light source here. It's not very clear, but broadly speaking, this is the proposals that are on the table from the city deal. You're all very familiar with it, so I'm not going to go into detail. So next, if you could just hit the button. Is there a clicker that I can use?
To go?
Okay, so when I saw the proposals from the city deal, with these...
This one, unfortunately.
Okay, we'll get by, hopefully. When I saw the proposals by the city deal, the thing that horrified me perhaps the most was the fact that the busways are coming into the city centre, but there is a big question mark about whether or not those buses will be able to function effectively in the inner city. So, yeah, thanks. Does that work?
Yes,
Oh,
press
brilliant.
the key button. Can't say forward.
Yep.
And the laser pointer on that.
Okay, fantastic. So there's a big question mark about what's going to happen to the buses when they get to the inner city. And the solution that was proposed by the city deal initially was that we would close the inner city radial routes and key highways or roads in the inner city, and at peak time it would only be allowed for buses to travel. Now we all know that that went down like a lead balloon, and there was vociferous opposition to that. It does raise a question though, what is now going to happen to the buses when they get to the city centre? So I wanted to look at, well, how many buses are we talking? And we shouldn't be thinking about the number of buses next year or even in 2025. We need to be thinking about the 2030s and beyond, because the types of infrastructure that is being planned is really going to make a massive difference to Cambridge over that long-term period. So construction of major works on radial routes into the city is a long-term thing, so we need to think about whether those solutions are going to meet the needs on a long-term basis. So how many buses are currently coming into Cambridge? We've looked at the timetable. 125 buses an hour are presently coming into the city centre, servicing the whole of the city. In the future, and projecting ahead to 2031, and this is based on the data that is available from the census and also from Cambridge County Council's data on population projections, we're talking at least 200, and by some projections 300 to 350 plus buses coming into the city centre per hour at peak times. Now think about that, the implications of that kind of volume of a bus-based solution in the inner city. I was deeply concerned about the implications for the heritage of the city, the practicality, and also the sustainability as an environmental consultant. So I was looking at alternatives and in particular light rail. Light rail has been adopted in over 300 cities in Europe. It is a well-proven and established technology. It works. Many people have said to me on making this presentation, oh, but Cambridge is too small. Lausanne in Switzerland is the same population of Cambridge when it established a light rail. It also established an underground metro. I think the assumption that Cambridge is too small really needs to be questioned, and we should be thinking about not just the population now, but the population in the 2030s and beyond. And the population, by the way, in South Cambs through to 2031 is projected to rise by 30% from 2011 to 2031. The population of the city is projected to rise by 18% over that same period. So the scale and the pace of growth is massive. Here I'm highlighting some of the benefits of light rail. In view of the time I have available, I'm just going to skip over that and say, go to my website, there's loads of stuff there explaining about what the benefits are, but I've mentioned some of them already. So the essence of the proposal that we have, it would not replace all other forms of transport. It is complementary to bus services, to private vehicles, to walking and to cycling. It is a backbone of public transport that we're suggesting that would run, I think there's a pointer here, which would be kind of nice, from the Girton interchange up in the northwest, and it would run through the West Campus, through the inner city, down to the Central Rail Station, and then down to Addenbrooke's. There'd be a spur out to the M11 here, I'll explain why in a minute. And then it would continue down to the south, Granter Park, and the biosciences industries in the south part of Cambridge. So that is the core sort of main line, if you like. It doesn't meet the needs of all the city, we recognise that. However, there's potential for extensions, and so in the northeast side of the city, an extension could be made up to the Science Park area here, and out to the east, the Newmarket part of the A14. there's actually an old rail alignment here that we would adopt. In the central city, we think that the only way to do this practically is using a tunnel. 3.2 kilometres would be the length. It would extend from the Cavendish Labs area into the rail station. So there'd be 3 underground stations over that distance. Okay. A second extension could be considered out to the east side to Fulbourn. There's already a heavy rail route out there, so we don't know yet whether that's necessary, but it's certainly worth thinking about. And then an extension in the north, which would extend from the Science Park back to the Girton interchange. And that would create a circle line, essentially, which gives people a lot of choices about how they would move about the city. Of course, that's just the inner city, but for an integrated system, we need to link into what's happening in the region, particularly in a situation like Cambridgeshire, where a lot of the commuters are coming in from the outside. I'm just going to go back, sorry, because I'm realising our audience here is principally Histon Road, sort of Milton Road area. So I just want to point out this northern route here has stops on Histon Road and Milton Road, and the idea is that it would pick up commuters coming in from the north and get them onto the light rail so that they could move quickly into the city centre or to Addenbrooke's or to the Science Park area. So the regional picture is we have the heavy rail routes already servicing the main areas to the southwest and the northeast, but out towards Haverhill and towards Camborne, there's currently not any rail route there, so we're suggesting that in the long term it could be extended out to those areas. This is an illustration of the time that it would take to get from any particular point on the network into the city centre. So from Histon Road, which is this point here, it would take 5 minutes to get to the Girton interchange, and then 9.5 minutes to the city centre. So 5 and 9, 14, about 15 minutes from the A14 Histon Road interchange into the city centre. So that's, even though it goes in that kind of semicircle, which perhaps is a disadvantage, it is still faster than trying to go straight on the road. I'm going to skip over that because it's time, but this is a model of the accessibility of the network. And this is about how people get to the stops within the city, and that's principally by walking and cycling. And we've calculated that 90% of the city would be within a 20-minute walk or an 8-minute cycle ride of a stop on that network. Now, for you guys, it's not particularly good in the centre there with this model, but it is a conceptual model and it could be changed, and maybe we need to adjust that to service the northern part of the city in a better way. I mentioned the stop down here on the M11. One of the reasons for that, and there's a number, but one that I want to highlight is we would establish a coach park there so that tourist coaches and intercity coaches would stop on the periphery of the city, and they would take the light rail into the centre. One reason for that, actually purely selfish, is that that would give us a captured demand, which would pump up the revenue on the system, which is important, actually. So how much is this going to cost? It's going to cost a lot more than the bus way. But I'm going to hopefully show you that this is achievable. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to whip through this quite quickly. For that main route of what we call the Isaac Newton line, the order of costs that we're talking, including the tunnel and stations, and the stations are expensive, we're talking 200 million for the stations alone, because they're underground. About 870 million. Serious money. For the extensions, another 700 million. So that's 1.5 billion that we're up to there. And About 2.2 billion if you include the extensions out into the regions. Now, you're all saying, well, forget that. It's never going to happen because it's far too expensive. And I sort of had that point of view initially as well until I started to research it and question that assumption. The Nottingham Net has a light rail system. It cost 850 million and it's highly successful. The A14 upgrade, just the upgrade, is costing 1.7 billion. So this is about an investment for the future. It is phased over a 10 to 15 year period, so while it's a lot of money, 1.5 billion, actually when you do it over a number of years, it's achievable. Sorry about that, you're not going to be able to read that, but hopefully I can just show you the headline figures. The cost, I'm saying, is 1.4 billion, that kind of order for the main extensions, tunnelling and the Isaac Newton line. We can raise that money through a combination of the city deal money, devolution funding, institutional subscriptions, borrowing through bond issues, banks, and also borrowing against land value, which is another mechanism that we can use. We could raise 1.4 billion, I think that's doable. We've been talking to banks. And if you do the numbers over how you repay that, including the revenue, it can be repaid over a 30-year period completely, and it would actually, by these calculations, it would actually make a small profit of 10 million a year, based on certain assumptions about the ridership, etc. So, is this doable? Many of us believe that it is. I guess for the last 6 months I've spent from initially very few people thinking it's doable to now quite a number. Our main call at this point is let's do the proper numbers and let's figure this out and get it right for Cambridge. Cambridge really deserves better, and we really need to think long term on this and make the investment for the future. I just want to finish by bringing you up to speed with where we're at in terms of getting some kind of traction on it. About 3 weeks ago, myself and Rail Future, who is partnering with us on this initiative, we had a meeting with the leader of the city deal, Lewis, to discuss our proposals. That was the first meeting that they've actually asked us to have. And Lewis has agreed that light rail and our concepts in particular should be brought into consideration for tranche 2 of the city deal funding. So we really welcome that, and we think that's a great step forward. However, there's still tranche 1, where serious money is about to be spent and decisions are being made on things which, if you think about what might happen at tranche 2, you might make a completely different decision about how you're going to play things out. So why would you actually divorce your decisions about tranche 1 from your decisions at tranche 2? So to me, it makes a nonsense to actually make decisions now when it's already been acknowledged by the leader of the city deal that we should be considering light rail at tranche 2. So we're working hard to roll that back, and we've got the support of the MP Heidi Allen to address that very question and get both tranches put into one consideration together with devolution, and then think long term. That is a total game changer in terms of the solution that's appropriate for Cambridge, in my opinion. So I've run a little bit over time, but thank you for your attention. Bye.
We haven't got a lot of time. Does anyone got any particular questions? Just for a few minutes, Colin? Yeah?
What's your connection with Smart Cambridge Transport and who organizes them?
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, we're working closely with Edward. In fact, you may have even seen in the Independent last week, he had a small piece on light rail extending, actually following pretty much our model. Edward, to some extent, thinks we're being too ambitious, I think that's fair to say. I don't think he'd mind me saying that. But he feels that for smarter Cambridge Transport, he needs to take a sort of shorter-term view and be pragmatic and deal with the things that are really on the table right now. As Cambridge Connect, we're taking a longer term view and we're saying, yeah, we know these local things are happening, but we're focused on the long term. Early on, we did decide that we would work closely together, but keep the initiative slightly separate for that reason, because there's the short and long term. Yeah.
How far are you working with the university and the work that Robert Mayer is doing?
Yeah. Ooh. I'll try and keep this real short. But Robert Mayer and Professor John Miles from the engineering department have been carrying out research for the last 6 to 8 months or so on another initiative which is bus-based, and it is quite radical. There was actually a piece on it in the news, Cambridge Independent, or was it Cambridge News? Cambridge News, several weeks ago. And that's a radical kind of solution. It's laser-guided bus. The bus would travel very fast, 120 miles an hour. This bus has not been developed yet. It is still on the research paper. But Robert Mayer is doing the part of the work related to the tunnelling. Their proposals are to tunnel under the inner city, just as we are suggesting. I've been a member of what they call their Transport Roundtable, which is a small group of about 20 people or so, looking at all these questions. And what we're doing now is we're trying to put his proposal, our proposal, and the city deal proposals for buses all together and make a proper comparative study and then see how they all stack up.
Do we have any chance that the city deal will halt their process in favour of this?
Well,
I think
believe so.
As a representative of the Federation of Cambridge Residents Associations, I believe fully that that is what our residents would like to hear.
Well, I of course would be delighted if that comes to pass, and that's really what we're fighting for. I think we've made incredible progress, actually, especially in the last 3 months, where especially Heidi Allen and Daniel Zeichner have both called for a pause on the city deal and to get this figured out. They kind of recognise that we need to take that long-term view, and they are representing the population as a whole, I think. I think many people share that view, so hopefully, but it's not a done deal yet. But I think devolution is going to come into the mix here, and that will shape things as well.
Just a couple more questions. Do anyone else? John and Charlotte. John?
Do I need a microphone?
Okay. It won't reach, afraid. You have to speak up a bit.
Okay. You asked at the beginning of your presentation, if we had a blank sheet, what would we envisage? And I think your answer is wonderful, absolutely marvellous. But it just cannot be afforded. Now, let me tell you that over the next 15 years, from the 2 principal sources of funding that the government has promised this, not this city, but this region, is 600 million for everything. Wisbech railway station, upgrading the A10, upgrading the A47, and this sort of talk about the money that should be spent on Cambridge causes huge resentment in the rest of the county, because they see that Cambridge is going to grab the lion's share of the scarce money that is available. And your scheme, although I say it's, in conception it's wonderful, it would only really be economical for about 3 hours a day during peak periods. How many trains will be going out to Girton at 10:30 in the morning? The optimum movement of passengers in this region is during a relatively restricted peak period. But you're going to be laying on this hugely expensive system, presumably 16, 17, 18 hours a day.
Okay, there's quite a few points there. Can I respond to one or two of them? On the question of the overall cost, let's just take first the Isaac Newton line, which we've estimated at 800 million, including the tunnel. The city deal presently has on the table 500 million. So, well, there's lots of caveats.
5 years, and it's conditional.
Right. I know all the caveats. I don't know if we've got time to go into all for them here. But the point is that we're suggesting a solution which would be 300 million more than what's on the table with the city deal. Presently, the models for financing these things that have been considered are entirely based on public funding. We're not suggesting that. We suggest that there should be a public-private partnership where you join up with private sources of funding and look to be a bit more creative with how you finance it. And people we've been talking to in the banking industry think that that is something that is achievable.
So what promises have you got? Has the university promised anything?
No, of course not, because the first thing we did, in the final slide here says comparative studies. We need to do the proper research. Instead of making assumptions about what is affordable and what the costs are going to be, we need to do a thorough and detailed assessment of the costs and benefits. I recognise that we haven't done that. This has been a voluntary initiative and that all those studies are needed. To give you an idea, I mean, I don't know what the cost of the Milton Road and Histon Road consultancies were, but you're talking hundreds of thousands to do those kinds of studies. And that's what we're calling for, is that detailed studies should be done because the decisions that are being made are going to affect this region for the long term.
Sorry, one more question, we have to move on.
I really like your plan, I really do. My concern here is actually John Hicken, obviously being on the county council and sort of having the experience of sort of, you know, being on both sides, the city and the county, when, you know, they couldn't afford